Geek Vibes Live is rated G for geek.
Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of Geek Vibes Interview, brought to you by Geek Vibes Nation. I am your host, Dom Fisher, and today we will have writer, producer, director, and New York Times bestselling author David Shields. And we are going to discuss his new movie, Lynch, A History. And we're just going to wait for him to call in.
Hi, Dom.
Yes, hello.
Hi, I'm David Shields.
All right.
Okay.
Are you ready? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me good?
Hold on. Okay, David, you're on with Dom from Geek Vibes Nation.
Okay. Dom, hi.
Hello, David. How you doing?
Just fine, yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and do my little intro real quick. So, welcome everyone to another episode of Geek Vibes Interview, brought to you by Geek Vibes Nation. I'm your host, Dom Fisher, and today I have with me writer, producer, director, and New York Times bestselling author David Shields, and we're here to talk about his new movie, Lynch, A History. How you doing, David?
Just fine. Yourself, Dom?
Yeah, I'm great. It's a little hot where I'm at, but, I'm going to make it through.
Where are you?
I'm in Nashville.
Oh, my goodness. That must be toasty. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little humid. So I got a chance to screen this film last week, and, I don't really usually when I get screeners, I don't watch a trailer because I want to go in there fresh, and once I got done, I was taken aback, and I was like, wow, like I didn't expect this, and it took a person that I already liked myself and just kind of made this situation more, it made it mean more than, kind of put it in a way that, like, I knew what it meant, and now there's this film that puts it in a nice package. It's like, hey, look, this is this guy. So what made you, what intrigued you about Marshawn Lynch?
Well, thanks for saying that, first of all, that I know what you mean. Probably a lot of people, they turn on the movie, they're expecting a Marshawn Lynch movie, they're expecting maybe, a sports pick, a biopic, like a standard whatever, ESPN 30 for 30. And,
Right.
In a way, the Marshawn Lynch is a relatively known commodity to any halfway alert sports fan. And, that we wanted to try and get, beyond the easy narrative of Marshawn. And so your question, I think, is what drew me to him, and I started the film now, my goodness, almost 5 years ago. In a way, I felt, especially at the time, it's hard to recall now because in a way the film seemed so much of our current, present moment. But at the time, I felt like the conversation surrounding him was so misguided. People seemed to think he was either just being petulant, or he was being shy, or that he was doing this just randomly. He just didn't care to be interviewed. And as someone who grew up in the Bay Area myself, in a very political family, who struggled with a speech impediment in my childhood, I just knew there was enormous politics and rage and purpose to Marshawn's seemingly cryptic refusal to speak to the media. I mean, when I showed the film in Los Angeles, a year ago, a rapper from Oakland came up to me afterward and said, no black kid from Oakland is going to watch this film and see Marshawn's refusal to speak to the press as anything other than a black citizen refusing to speak to cops. And I felt like, in a way, the film feels very prescient. So to answer your question directly, I just felt strongly that the media in Seattle and nationally were not understanding how deep the roots were, how deep the implications were of Marshawn's silence. And I wanted to explore and try to understand and then to convey what Marshawn's silence meant to me and means to me and maybe means to him and maybe means to African American people and maybe to the country. So I wanted to, in a way, try to correct what seemed to me like a false media narrative.
Yeah, and I know while it was all of the stuff was happening live, I kind of, and maybe it's just me being more in tune and people maybe just watching clips on a one-off, but I was following the whole narrative of what was going on, and you could kind of clearly tell that that he was just kind of tired of the same questions, like, oh, how was the game? Well, you watched the game, you saw how the
I know you mean, why do I need, I just ran 64 yards, and then this unbelievably predictable thing, like, how did it feel to score the game-winning touchdown? I mean, how do you think it felt? It's just, it's just unbelievable, the cliches of it. But anyway, go ahead.
No, and I was going to say that you can, and what's the great thing about Marshawn being, because you accurately portrayed him as a very, he's a loving kind of big kid of a person that doesn't need media attention to do good things, because we always find out about the things he's done months later because he doesn't have to, put on a show to say that, hey, I did this.
Totally.
But what was really great to me is it seemed like the film itself was not just an encapsulation of Marshawn and what was going on with him along with other athletes in the same situation, but it was done in a way that kind of encapsulates the attention span of our current society, because we know a lot of people have short attention spans, and this film doesn't allow you to sit still. It can, it doesn't allow you to relax, to maybe wander off in your thoughts. It's clip after clip, and you're like, oh, and I think the way you did that is amazing.
Thanks a lot. That's incredibly meaningful to me. What you say, we even had pinned up on our bulletin board, this idea, the film should never feel like you're watching television, that we didn't ever want it to relax into a kind of, easy norms of conventional documentary filmmaking, that we wanted to make a film, frankly, that Marshawn Lynch would like, that we often thought of it as, imagine the whole film as one long Beastquake run, sort of Beastquake 3.0, and imagine all of the stops and starts and stutters and reversals and speeding up and slowing down and spins. And, we imagine almost like the sort of GoPro camera inside of somebody's helmet, and you're almost trapped inside this helmet, and you have 700 clips over 84 minutes that we're changing clips every 7 seconds. And so the film has a kind of, what would you call it, a kind of violence, a velocity, a speed, a ferocity. And so I think you've captured something really crucial to me, that we thought if the film ever, descended into a kind of Ken Burns, soporific, documentary style, it would feel totally DOA. And so that we wanted to make a film that felt as alive and visceral and ferocious as Marshawn Lynch and as a Marshawn Lynch run. So I think that's absolutely central. And also this whole idea, which you mentioned at the beginning of the question, of, this unbelievable rhetoric of, sports world's cliches, heavily driven by a majority white sports media, which for me is, just unbelievably trapped into a kind of corporate speak, a business speak, a kind of white guy bro speak, a frat boy speak. And I think it's, for me, again, I'm white, but, I'm trying to imagine myself into a black athlete's psyche, and it's like it just feels so soul-sucking. It feels so much you've experienced immense violence and ecstasy and joy and pain on the field, and over 3 hours. And the moment that you get off the field, you're being asked to turn this amazing theater and canvas into kind of corporate speak, and it just feels so soul-killing. I mean, I sort of know that as a writer, if you write a book and you're somehow told to explain it, and if I could explain it, I wouldn't have written the book, and I think in the same way that Marshawn, quite powerfully, I think, doesn't want to give away his soul in these, to me, kind of white guy sound bites. He just won't do it. And there's something so eloquent and so powerful and so galvanizing about that stand.
Yeah, and it also kind of leads to, just taking your power back. We've seen with, the NBA, the players have a lot of power as far as their negotiating their contracts and garnering more money,
right.
and kind of have a control over how they come out and what things they're going to wear. Or the opposite of the NFL, which
right.
for lack of a better term, it has kind of a plantation feel to how they treat the players and how they talk about the players.
Totally.
So it leads to kind of comments we've heard over the years, which is the whole shut up and dribble narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this film is able to do is the people who feel that way, it contextualizes why they're wrong. And, if you only, of course, look at the one side, you're going to think that one thing. But this shows you what those people are saying and how it affects Marshawn himself and other players and even coaches like Popovich and Bill Belichick, whether they don't want to answer these mundane questions.
I know. Isn't that fascinating how Popovich, who's, pretty woke guy, and he's really contributed a lot to the contemporary moment. But it is fascinating how when, say, at the end of the film, that we run clips from Jason Garrett and Belichick and Popovich being kind of these grumpy kind of old uncle types who refuse to answer the reporter's question. I think it is fascinating how when these guys, somehow the Belichick is this sort of vaguely lovable old guy that the culture somehow finds or, finds somehow whatever sort of likably grumpy. And so it's fascinating how these, elder white statesmen can get away with this refusal to speak when Marshawn refused to speak, it was treated as a kind of, as you're almost implying, as almost slave rebellion, which I think in a strange way it is, in the sense that I think, it is fascinating. You quoted that line, shut up and dribble, which is, I think, a line from who? Laura Ingraham talking to LeBron. And to me, what's fascinating about the film is that Marshawn's choice to shut up, he's not shutting up because Laura Ingraham told him to shut up. He's going to shut up because, to me, it's sort of fascinating. He's shutting up on his own will. And in shutting up, he's actually changing the narrative, saying, I'll speak when I want to speak, and I'll speak if you pay me $1 million to do your commercial, or I'll speak when you come to my hometown and you actually listen to what I'm saying, and I'll introduce you to my friends and family, or I'll speak in my own language. I think that's, whoever owns the narrative owns history. And I think a huge part of it is refusing to speak in the dominant culture's language. I'm just not going to speak to you in this corporate rhetoric. And I just think I just find that immensely moving and immensely inspiring. And I think a whole, how old is Marshawn now? He's around 34. I do think a younger generation of black athletes have learned, they've learned from Kaepernick, they've learned from LeBron, they've learned from obviously Muhammad Ali, but they've learned from Marshawn, who's in a way so media savvy that he knows his comedy and his silence, his sort of poetic, cryptic sayings, in a way have more currency now than maybe, in a way possibly, than a more old-fashioned approach. There's a certain potency in Marshawn's silence, and he's great at those bumper sticker lines, like all those lines of Marshawn's that we all know. I mean, he's like this brilliant, poet.
Yeah, and it's crazy that like we see like that they are. It is like a training thing of you should go out there and just say these things, because I particularly remember a situation where I think it was Cam Newton. They talked about him being upset and about a Super Bowl loss and him not want to shake hands, and then you have Peyton Manning did the same thing, and no one said anything. You had Eli Manning come out and say, and I've always noticed that they, someone like Eli is like a face of a team and kind of a company man personality that they're like, oh, he's so respectful, and it's like he's just saying like his lines. That's all he's saying.
Exactly.
And I think what Marshawn and others that are following suit is that I think the abrasiveness from other people is that everybody wants to be themselves and they're afraid to, but then you have someone who was brave enough to like, I'm going to be authentic, and then you hate them for it, and then later on you're going to praise them for starting a movement, but you're too late because you're already on the wrong side of history.
That's really beautiful. That's beautifully said. I mean, I think exactly. I mean, it drives me nuts when people are called, quote, classy, like somehow Eli Manning is classy, because all he does is mimic the total corporate line. And that I think that's a great point too, Dom, that, now of course, that Marshawn, in a way, I think perhaps partly because of this film, but partly because the culture has changed, partly because, Trump, Kaepernick, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, et cetera, that, now somehow I think that we understand that Marshawn Lynch is almost this elder statesman. He's sort of a beloved figure, but as you say, sorry, too late. Like, when there was actual skin in the game, in 2015 or 2016 or 2014, when the culture hadn't shifted a bit, there was immense pushback, immense sort of racial invective sent to Marshawn Lynch's, in Marshawn Lynch's way, when he was, in Buffalo in the early 2000s or the mid 2000s, he was called, terrible names from gangster and thug to more horrible names. And, now, of course, 2020, as you say, a lot of people who had been on the wrong side of history are now somehow trying to get on the right side of history. And it's a little, too late. But I think, his legacy seems to me unimpeachable, that he was there when it was really hard to do. And I think, he's an amazingly authentic human being. I mean, I think a big part for him is that there's definitely a racial element, but there's also a familial element, that his mom said little and was always there for him. His father apparently said a lot and was always absent, was, had some drug problems, was in and out of prison. And I think this unbelievably powerful dichotomy exists in Marshawn between saying little but doing everything versus talking a lot of nonsense and not being authentically there. That I think, he obviously still loves his mom. He's estranged from his father. He ended up taking his mother's name and jettisoning his father's name. And obviously it has huge cultural and political and racial elements. But I think, too, for him, he really wants to be an authentic human being. And I think he is more successful and effective than most of us at existing within a capitalist system and still being remarkably true to himself. And to me, he's a really impressive human being and a really impressive citizen.
I'm sorry, we need to wrap up.
Oh, sorry.
Unfortunately.
Okay. So my last question. So with this this film being loosely related to Black Planet facing race during the NBA season, are there any plans to maybe adapt any other of your books into film?
Interesting. Well, thanks for being. I'm trying to think of anything else that I can talk about. I am working on some other projects. I'm working with Danny Glover on making a film about Louis Armstrong being sent by the State Department during the Cold War to Africa. Okay. I recently published a book on Trump, and I'm working with a friend on adapting that into a film. Working on a couple of film projects, all very much in the beginning stages, but I think maybe for people interested in the Lynch film, the one I'm perhaps most excited about is this film about Louis Armstrong traveling to Africa during the Cold War at the behest of the State Department as a cultural ambassador. That one's a long way from coming out, but I'm hoping that'll be out in the not too distant future.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Lynch of History is currently on Topic, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Vimeo. We really appreciate you stopping by, David. This is an amazing conversation that I've been looking forward to all weekend. And if you haven't read any of his books, please go, check them out. And do you have social media where people can maybe talk to you?
I do. I'm definitely available on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you just sort of Google me, David Shields, those should come up.
All right. Well, like I said, we appreciate it. This was amazing, and I can't wait to see what you have in store for the future.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Really great chatting with you.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.